Oregon did not play great against Maryland. And I just keep thinking it could be a good thing.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lots to get to. Top standouts. Oregon's got a new commit in the class of 2025. Shout out Oregon women's basketball, by the way. Kelly Graves beat number 12 Baylor last night with the new look team. And look, I'm not saying Oregon is back in that particular realm. I'm just saying they're 3-0, beat the number 12 team in the country, and they didn't have that capability last year. That's all I will say. So shout out to the Ducks. Crowd was popping too. But let's talk football here, because Oregon didn't play a great game. I mean, if you had to assign grades, I'm curious, drop your thoughts in the comments, where you would put Oregon's performance against Maryland. If C is average, and look, I'm someone who is an old school grader of sorts, where C is average, C plus slightly above, and so on and so on. But if you go by the modern kind of grading system where a B is really average, that was about a C plus game from Oregon. There was a lot of sloppiness. There were a lot of penalties. They were beating themselves. Maryland's best offense consistently throughout the game was Oregon's defense giving them a first down. But here's why I think it could be a good thing for the Ducks. When you're playing as well as Oregon has for the last couple of months, you've got the big win against Ohio State. You've got, well, important win. Obviously not a big win. It was by a single solitary point. But that's, of course, all that matters. You got the win against Ohio State. That creates a lot of momentum. You got these big wins against Michigan by 21, where you're going, thumbs down. Are you not entertained? All that after the Michigan game. Illinois, 38-9. Purdue, 35-0. Going back a ways even before that, Oregon State wasn't close. UCLA, Michigan State, none of these games have been close. Every now and then, you need a reminder. Not necessarily an outright wake-up call, but at least a little reminder to the guys in the locker room, hey, you can't coast every week. And Maryland, a team that Oregon knows they are better than. You know it, I know it, they know it. I think Maryland knows it as well, whether they would publicly admit that or not. Everybody knows this. So why was that game ever competitive? Because Oregon didn't play to its standard. And I think a reminder that doesn't seriously threaten your standing in the Big Ten rankings or in the college football playoff picture, I think that can be a good thing. And hopefully those guys go to work this week and say to themselves, you know what? We can't play like that every week. You can get away with that against Maryland, but Wisconsin is up this week. You can go into Madison and play a Wisconsin team that is better than Maryland, and you play like that, you can walk out with a loss, and suddenly the season takes on a whole different feel. And Oregon's got their sights set on the Big Ten championship game. If they play like that, yeah, they're not beating whoever their opponent would be in that scenario. So that's why I think it could be a good thing, is Oregon is 10-0. This is only the third time that this has ever happened in the history of Oregon football, 2010, 2012, and 2024. And the prospect of going 12-0, it's well within Oregon's sights. It's right there for the taking. You got to go to Madison this week, play a better game, beat the Badgers, which they're capable of doing, as everybody knows, capable of losing if they don't play well. And then you get a bye week. Hopefully guys get healthy like Marcus Harper, like Tez Johnson, and the like, though I'll talk about the offensive line a little bit later on today's show. I thought they did pretty darn well overall. And then you've got Washington, and if you win those two games, you're in the Big Ten championship game. So it's kind of the perfect blend of Oregon plays a C-plus C game by their standard compared to what they have done against teams of Maryland's caliber the rest of the season. They walk away with a 21-point win, so they're not losing any perception if there's ever a subjective decision on where should Oregon be ranked here. There, no one's worried about that. For anyone who didn't watch this game nationally, and whether you like it or not, subjective perception of a college football team matters a whole heck of a lot. Why is Indiana not ranked in the top? We'll see where they are in the playoff rankings on Tuesday. But why have they not been ranked higher? Because they have an IU sticker on their helmet. And that's the perception of them is, well, I don't know how long this can last. And then they only beat Michigan by 5 points. 21-point win for Oregon, that's not turning any heads. Most people probably didn't watch this game start to finish. They just looked at the final score, and Oregon's doing just fine. So if they clean up all the issues that they've got internally, they didn't lose anything nationally. They didn't lose anything with the record, of course, since they won the football game. I think it could be a good thing that Oregon didn't play well. But make no mistake about it, they did not play well. And I think it was most surprising to see the defense play the way that it did. Oregon had some penalty issues early last year, even early this season, but those I felt were more on the offensive side of the ball. I don't have a penalty by penalty tracker of how many have been offensive or defensive, or if anyone even tracks that. I'm sure someone does somewhere. Maybe. I don't know. You guys help me in the YouTube comments. I don't know that anyone tracks offensive versus defensive penalties. Maybe they do, and I just haven't heard of it before. But early in the season, the problems for Oregon penalty-wise felt like they were more consistently on the offensive side of the ball, which, working in a new quarterback, something you probably expect. You got a new quarterback, you got a first-year full-time starting center. In Poncho, they were going back and forth with Charlie Pickard, and they had false start issues, they had holding issues, and those were kind of the things that were the most glaring. But this was the first time where it felt like the defense was really letting Oregon down. And the defense was the reason Maryland was hanging around in the game. I did not think the offense played particularly well. Dylan Gabriel, I know there were a couple of short fields with the turnovers, but he was under 200 yards passing. I did not think we would see that in a game this year. He finishes 23 of 34, 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. No interceptions, which is, of course, job number one when playing the quarterback position. But Oregon on third down in this game was just 6 of 15. That is not where they have been all season long. On third down this year, Oregon is 50%. They've been one of the best in college football, and 6 of 15, that's not where they had been. But I got a question earlier this year, and I still feel this way, that by a 51-49 or 55-45 lean, this is a defensively led team. And I think we still saw that on Saturday. A defense that committed self-inflicted wounds over and over and over again still was able to carry an offense that couldn't convert third downs and wasn't creating explosive plays. If you said going into this game, hey, they're not going to do those two things, well, you probably think the offense would struggle. You look up and there's still 39 points on the scoreboard. And yeah, the defense was sloppy, got to clean up the penalties and whatnot, but they still made a lot of impact plays. And on my second watch of the game, I think the defensive line played better than I originally thought. That's going to factor into my individual standouts. There were just a couple of moments where it was, hey, everything was right. 95% of this play was really good. And that 5% that was off ends up giving Maryland a first down. That happened a lot. Whether that was a 3rd and long or a 4th and long pass interference call or a sack that results in a face mask when he's already got the guy within his grasp. Like, those were just the sorts of things that I don't expect to continue. So I think it's fair to watch Oregon's defense more carefully and see if they clean these things up. I don't think anyone should be worried about that side of the ball. Once can be written off pretty easily. If it happens again against Wisconsin, okay, now it's a trend. Once can be an anomaly. Twice is the beginning of a trend, and thrice consecutively would be, all right, this is a problem and someone's got to fix it. I trust Dan Lanning. I think he has got our trust at this point. I mean, the guy had 3 different linemen touch the ball on an 8-point possession. In the third quarter, no less. I was told Oregon has no ability to succeed in the third quarter. Man. Nobody told that to Dan Lanning, obviously. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Individual standouts, it's my favorite segment of the year. Can only do it so many times for however many games Oregon plays, which hopefully is, how many do we want that to be? I've got to think about that. Let's see, that'd be 13, 1, 2, 3, 16. Hopefully 16 times we can do it this year, 14 last year. Individual standouts, a lot of them are on the aforementioned defense, and that's coming up next. Right after we talk about FanDuel, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Oregon barely didn't cover. 1st and goal from the 4, had to settle for a field goal. That's the difference between them covering and not covering. So if you're a good teams win, great teams cover sort of guy, I get it. I get it, or gal out there. I know I have some females in the audience. Anyway, so I got derailed, but I'm going to center back on to FanDuel here because that's America's #1 sportsbook. 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It can be a sweat. It can come down to one play, one sequence, this moment here or there. FanDuel.com. That's the place to do it all. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Boy, I tell you, as live reads go, that wasn't my smoothest, and yet you're still going to go check out FanDuel. I have faith. There's a lot of great information over there, even if you're not going to bet on things. So, individual standouts. Let's start with Noah Whittington, because this is a game where Jordan James is expected to be fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. They're just resting. But this guy has just evolved himself over the course of the season in a big way for Oregon. You can't have just one running back. As great of a run at the tailback position Oregon has had my entire life, and even before that, going back to the Mo Morris days, you can't have just one guy. You're going to wear down over the course of the season. And a week where Oregon is cruising, Jordan James getting 7 carries, I think that's great. But you still got to be able to run the ball. Oregon was indeed able to run the football in this game to the tune of 180 yards at 5.8 yards a carry. Yeah, that'll do. And Noah Whittington was a big reason why. And he's doing well in the passing game. Not surprised. 13 carries, 77 yards for Whittington. But what I loved most about watching him in this game, and we've seen this kind of starting against Purdue, and then Illinois was kind of the breakout Noah Whittington game for everybody. His lateral movement is what made him a special player. You go look at his best run from the 2022 season, and it was a touchdown against Arizona. And he puts these side shuffle moves on guys to kind of sift his way through traffic and get extra yardage. There was a carry he had, I think it was his longest of the night in the second half, I'm pretty sure, where he's running left and he shuffles back once to the right, gets forward again, and then he shuffles again back to the right and picks up more yards. That's Noah Whittington at his best. And then when you bring in the physicality factor that we saw on runs like the trucking safety incident against Illinois, this guy's a really, really good number 2 back. And it's good to have him back. It's good to see him healthy after the ACL injury last year. So definitely wanted to shout him out because on a night where they, kind of wanted to let Jordan James take a little bit of a breather, Noah Whittington had the hot hand, and that's a great thing to see. Standout number 2, Kobe Savage. This was unequivocally, by far, no close second in my view, the best game Kobe Savage had as an Oregon Duck. 9 tackles in this one. That led the way for Oregon, but that's not even what I liked most about what we saw from him. I mean, the guy can lay the lumber. Absolutely. And that was the scouting report on him when he came over from Kansas State, where he was an all Big 12 conference safety. I think he was honorable mention or second team over there. I hadn't seen that guy yet. I hadn't seen an all-conference caliber player. I know the Big 12 isn't as good of a league as the Big 10, though the Big 12 has a lot of really good, fun teams and is just a wild and crazy conference title race. If you want to hear me talk more about that, check out Locked On College Football because it's going to be really, really fun. But anyway, I hadn't seen that guy this year. Now, he hadn't been playing poorly. I wasn't so down on him, like, man, I don't know why he's out there. Might as well play Tyler Turner. Like, no, Oregon's not giving up chunk passing plays, and yeah, he's not amazing in man-to-man coverage per se, but most safeties aren't. It's hard to find those sorts of guys. This was the most impactful game. Many people know I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan. My standard for high-level safety play starts with one guy, and that's Earl Thomas. And Earl Thomas is probably the best safety I've ever rooted for. A bunch of great ones at Oregon, whether that's Verone McKinley, Javon Holland, going back to John Boyette, like a lot of great names there. This was an Earl Thomas sort of game where I was called back to those days for me as a sports fan because Savage was everywhere. He was making plays in the box. He was making plays sideline to sideline. And I just felt like he was around the ball every single time, and he did a couple nice things in coverage. I think it was Jamari Caldwell knocked a ball down at the line of scrimmage. If he hadn't done that, I think Savage would have had a pick deep in Maryland territory, maybe taken it to the house. He was trying to throw their quarterback, whose name is eluding me right now, amazingly, Billy Edwards Jr. I don't know how that slipped. Anyway, that's what box scores are for. Billy Edwards was trying to throw an in-breaking route, and it was decently covered, but there was a little separation, and Savage had read it and was breaking down on the ball. And I think if Edwards throws that ball and gets it up, I think Savage takes it and runs to the house pretty easily. So I thought that was by far the best game he has played as an Oregon Duck, and I loved seeing that. Sticking with the defensive side of the ball, because I wasn't, overly impressed with the offense. I mean, shout out Terrence Ferguson. Overcame the early drop, made a couple of big plays, had a third down conversion, had a touchdown later on that same drive as well. But I thought this was a big Tatum Tuioti game. And the fact that he and Mateo both can just have stretches where they don't make any impact, it feels, but then they can be the most impactful guy for sequences at a time, or they're just always around the ball. I think this tandem is every bit as good as we thought it would be coming into the season. And he was so incredibly active in this game. He ended with 4 tackles. Only one of them was solo, but I imagine if they track quarterback hurries and put them into a box score, which is a tough thing to track, so I understand why they don't, I think he would have had several. I saw him win a lot of 1v1 matchups. He was very disruptive, very active. I thought he had a great game. Another guy on the defensive line, Amari Washington. Same sort of thing. Now, he had a pass deflection in this game, so it was a little bit more impactful, but he, again, didn't have any tackles, but he continues to just come along and develop. And after this season, Derek Harmon's going to the NFL. Jamari Caldwell, I'm fairly certain, is out of eligibility. Amari Washington is a guy that I am going to talk about a lot in the offseason and have a lot of confidence in, because the more I watch him, the more I think he is, number one, capable of being an all-conference guy, and number two, the better I think he's getting. He just looks like someone, he is a senior, he looks like someone who is really coming into his own, little bit like Thibodeau did back in 2019. And by the end of the season, Kayvon Thibodeau is a much different player, and that's what I'm seeing from Amari Washington. And I think he's going to be a sharpie it in. Amari Washington, the starting defensive tackle for Oregon next year. I don't know that there's another guy on the roster that could beat him out on the depth chart. They could bring in a transfer at defensive tackle again. I don't think they would bring in 2 as a starter, because I think Washington's going to have a really, really good season next year. So the more I watch him, the more I like him. How about Devin Jackson? I, along with Jared Mack of 24/7 Sports and the Odds and Audibles podcast, big fans of Devin Jackson for the last few years. He is a crazy athlete, and I particularly like what he did in coverage in this game. He had, I think, just the one pass breakup, but as I was watching the game and then rewatching the game, I felt like he was just always in the right spot. And Dan Lanning talked about that before the year, that he was someone who, had these great physical traits, but wasn't always going to the right spot. And now they've got him there. I felt like he was blanketing his guy in coverage all the time. You don't see pass breakups from linebackers too often, so that he had one is of course good, but he's had a number of those moments throughout the year, and I think what makes him so interesting as a linebacker prospect is he can make plays in the backfield in the run game, but then he can have sequences like that, or run with Ashton Genty down the sideline in coverage as well. I think he's another guy like Amari Washington coming into his own. Sharpie him in as a starter next year, and I think he could be poised for a big, big leap. And then the last guy, who just has to be shouted out because he is a history-making player at Oregon. Janoris Wilson. I mean, come on, man. Are you kidding me with that? He pops into the game at number 91, which is not even his normal number, I don't think. The broadcast crew, God bless them, they were trying to figure out who it was, and they couldn't figure it out, because they probably looked at the Oregon roster and went, wait a minute, there is no 91. But he wears 78. He had to wear 91 to be eligible, because 78 is in the range of ineligible receivers. So he puts on a different jersey, and that touchdown reception, for those who don't know, gave Dylan Gabriel the all-time touchdowns record in NCAA history. That is the coolest thing to have be your first touchdown. Is I'm an offensive lineman, I catch the ball, and it makes history for Oregon's quarterback. Absolutely phenomenal. If you think I missed anyone that deserves a shout out on tomorrow's show, let me know in the comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. So Oregon flipped the tight end from Washington. That is good news. Is that the only recruiting news Oregon fans should be aware of? Not necessarily. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about Game Time, which has this feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. Yes, Oregon games included. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. That's why Game Time's the best. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Do you know what time it is? I do. It's game time. Do you remember recruiting? It does not stop. 24/7, 365 job, and Oregon's got another blue chip prospect in the class of 2025, Vander Ploog, who had been committed to Washington verbally for a while. 6'6", 223 pounds, Fullerton, California native, and he is now committed to the Oregon Ducks. This had been rumored for a while. There had been crystal balls and whispers behind the scenes that, he might flip to Oregon, and I don't know that the current season has a direct impact. As in, I don't know that it's the only factor, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know that Washington, who just got blasted 35-6 against Penn State, and then Oregon winning by 21, I don't think that was necessarily the moment, even though Ploog committed on Sunday, the day after those two games took place. Oregon's 10-0 and ranked number 1. Washington will probably make a bowl game. They'll beat UCLA this weekend, I would think. And then they come to town in a few weeks, and Oregon should be able to win that football game. But getting back to Ploog here, this is the first tight end commit of the class of 2025. Will it be the last one? There have been internet whispers about Lincoln Cure, the 5-star tight end who committed to Kansas State back in the summer. Oregon had Deshaun Brame at one point in time. He then flipped away to Tennessee, I believe it was. But they've got Ploog into the fold, and getting a tight end makes a lot of sense. This is a position where true freshmen have played for Oregon 3 of the last 4 years. It's just a position where guys can come in and be physically ready. That might not necessarily apply to Vander Ploog here, as I'll get into in a moment, but I think you would have said the same thing, perhaps, about Roger Saliapaga, who's a converted wide receiver in high school, and he has played meaningful snaps this year. When Terrence Ferguson was down, Kenyon Sadiq and Patrick Herbert and Roger Saliapaga were the 3 tight ends who played against Purdue while the game was still absolutely in question. So he's a 4-star tight end. According to 24/7 Sports, he's the number 12 tight end in the class and the number 241 prospect overall. 6'6", 223 pounds. I'll get to my comparison in a moment. But last year in high school down in California, he had 63 catches for 1,000, not 100, 1,047 yards and 12 touchdowns. So about 1 in every 5 receptions is a touchdown, which when you're 6'6", not a lot of kids in high school that can go toe-to-toe with you in the end zone. When the ball is thrown up into the sky, you're going to have a tendency to go and get it. He's got really good hands, very easy route runner, lines up at wide receiver a lot. Also has an offense that he plays in with some wing T formations where he blocks a little bit more. Doesn't blow me away with the blocking that he puts on his huddle highlights. And, I think he's definitely more of a pass catcher first compared to a blocking guy. That doesn't mean he can't learn, of course. I think you would have said, or I should say, I would have probably said the same thing about Kenyon Sadiq. And, well, he put on a lot of weight this offseason, and Kenyon Sadiq pushing people around. I think doing a really, really good job in the blocking sense. So, Ploog was committed to Washington. Other schools that were after him, Utah, Arizona State, Cal, and SMU. That's current unbeaten SMU, the only unbeaten over in the ACC. I won't say why they're the only unbeaten. I'll just throw that out there and I'll let people think about it for just a moment. But Oregon's class is sitting at number 9 in the class of 2025. It can still go higher. There are other blue chip guys out there. There are, you see these crystal ball rumors, and I put some weight into them. I don't put a ton because Yeah, it feels like they're right as often as they're wrong, but certainly they were right with this one. And I think people jump on the crystal ball predictions when they're wrong more than when they are actually right. But they don't always tell everything, but this has been, kind of expected for a while, and Oregon's able to make the flip. Of course, you got to get him to sign on National Signing or the early signing day at the end of December, at which point in time, hopefully, fingers crossed, Oregon will be preparing for a rather large and important football game. But Greg Biggins, 24/7 Sports recruiting analyst, said of him, quote, three-sport athlete whose first love was actually basketball. Love that. Both parents played college hoops at Biola and grandfather coaches at Azusa Pacific. So this is a bit of a sporty guy. Legit hooper who can play above the rim and also plays baseball. Oh my goodness. Have we found the new Bryce Betcher? Hey, I do not know, to answer your question that you might send my way, I do not know if Mark Wazakowski has been in contact. I'll just leave it at that, but hey, it's happened before. How about Betcher getting dapped up by the baseball team who was on the field before the game? It was so awesome. Anyway, Biggins continues, quote, only played football for 2 years, but shows natural talent, still raw in some areas, and needs to add upper body mass and strength to help become more physical in the run game, but has the frame to do so, can make plays down the field, wins 50-50 balls, that's my favorite thing about him, and contested catches, and already looks more fluid and explosive getting in and out of his breaks this offseason on 7v7 circuit. Intriguing kid for sure, and has some high-level upside as a prospect, end quote. So I had a lot of similar takeaways watching his highlight reel, that he's a guy who you throw the 50-50 ball up to. He's 6'6", and frankly, more than any tight end, he reminds me of Roger Saliapaga a bit, reminds me a little of Kyler Casper. Just from a frame standpoint, Casper's the only other pass catcher who's 6'6". I believe Terrence Ferguson is listed at 6 foot. Wait for it. Okay, so T. Ferg is 6'5", but he's got more of a vertical element to his game. T. Ferg's a better athlete than people probably give him credit for, but this is a guy who has a little Kenyon Sadiq. I don't think he's quite as explosive as Sadiq is. If you go watch Sadiq's highlights from high school, crazy, and we're seeing that play out. I don't know that Ploog is that sort of guy, but certainly someone who maybe needs a year to develop, maybe needs a year to get in the weight room, get his body right to actually play tight end. But being new to football, well, he seems to have risen up the ranks pretty quickly. To play for 2 years and then already be a top 24/7 product, that's a really impressive trait. So I like him for sure. I think it makes a lot of sense for Oregon to have at least one tight end in this class. We'll see if they go after two, but this is a guy who down the line, just keep this thought whenever his name pops up, 50-50 balls in the red zone. Same sort of deal as Kyler Casper, where maybe even as a true freshman, Ploog could get in there and be someone you say, hey, you're 6'6", we're just going to throw the ball up to you and see if you can go make a play. But Casper's also had that role when he's been healthy. Other news on the recruiting trail. Dakorien Moore, number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2025, Oregon commit. That was the biggest name that Oregon recruited over the summer. He's also their highest rated recruit in the 2025 cycle. He visited LSU over the weekend. And I'll also throw in a piece of news that Michigan and Penn State are still after Dorian Finney, who in the 24/7 rankings, but not in the composite, has gotten a bump up to 5-star. That's a defensive back from back east. We'll see what happens there. But Dakorien Moore visited LSU, and I got a couple of messages about that. And I have 2 thoughts. Number 1, I have not heard any major rumblings that the visit went so well that he's considering flipping, or are there any rumors or anything like that. And it's been, all of 24 hours since that visit took place, but nothing immediate at this time. Number 2, it doesn't hurt that LSU got smacked. Bama went in there with our old pal Kalen DeBoer and ran them out of the building. And recruits can look at that one of 2 ways. Now, the game result, recruiting guys like Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network, will tell you it does not singularly determine whether he's going somewhere, but it can contribute. I mean, and a guy can look at it one of 2 ways. First way is, boy, they're not where they need to be right now. I got to go help them. Or the second way is, I don't know if I want to be here. There was a viral video that went around when UMass was beating Mississippi State of a recruit who was on campus typing out his decommitment tweet. That sort of thing could happen. And the other thing, too, is I know Oregon fans will look into this, understandably so. Take a visit to a big-time program like LSU, yeah, that should absolutely have your attention. If you're a 17, 18-year-old kid and a university is saying, we'll pay for you to come out here, go to the game, have some meals, hang out, and be treated like a celebrity, I'd probably do that as many times as I could because that opportunity is not going to last forever. So I think that's absolutely in play, and I know for a fact that plenty of kids do that. They will take visits knowing I have no intention of going here, but this is just going to be fun. I'm just going to get to pay to. I'm going to not pay or well, no, I don't know about the paying side of things and whatnot, but someone else is going to pay for me to go see Alabama LSU at night at Death Valley. Yeah, I'd probably go. I'd probably go. Even if I still wanted to stay to Oregon. So I wouldn't have any sort of concern level there. It's something to keep an eye on, but my concern level right now for Dakorien Moore flipping, very, very low. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.